It's the ambition to try. That's the, you have a great team of people. That's just, enthralling.
People who tour these galleries often say, wow, I had no idea. Many think computing is about scientists, engineers, and mathematicians. But if you've ever texted, emailed, shopped online, or worked from home on your laptop, you know computing is about you. In the 1980s, computing became personal. It moved from the kit builder's garage to hundreds of millions of desktops. Much of the fuel for that revolution was software, created by a small startup called Microsoft. Co-founder Paul Allen was here recently, and we had a frank and open conversation about those early days, his later career, and his personal views about the future.
I should just begin by saying that sometimes you just can't really trust the media. And I'm saying this...
No idea what you mean.
And I'm saying this as somebody who comes from the media. I think we tend to kind of, oversimplify, we sensationalize. I think we care more about kind of the tension and conflict, and less about kind of depth and context. And I'm saying this because, judging by like the excerpt on 60 Minutes, the segment on 60 Minutes, the excerpt from Vanity Fair, some reviews, some blogs, you would think that, that your book is like something out of like the social network of like the 1980s or something. Like it's like a Bill Gates versus Paul Allen slam fest. I think somebody said that you were the bitter billionaire. And so I'm reading this stuff, and then I finally actually read the book.
Right.
And then I'm like, wait up a second, did they read the exact same book that I just read? Exactly. And I think the point that I'm trying to get at is this idea that I think in the book, you write as critically about yourself and about what you've done and kind of the failures that you've had, the successes and the failures, just as critically as you've written about the future of Microsoft or the relationship with Bill Gates. I think that was really interesting. And actually, that's kind of where I wanted to start off is, you've been ubiquitous on my Google alert in like the past 2 months now, and you're in this promotional book tour, and I'm just curious, what has surprised you the most about how people have reacted to the book? What has been the biggest surprise?
Well, I think there's been a number of things. I think in my life I've been fortunate to be involved with so many different things. Obviously, my involvement with Microsoft will always be the signature achievement, although I have high hopes for what the Brain Institute's doing now. We'll talk about that later.
Yeah, definitely.
But I've been involved in so many different things that, if anybody tries to pigeonhole me into one area,
it's hard to do.
I think they struggle to do that.
And you've said this in the book, and you also said in the interviews, that writing this book was one of the hardest things you've ever done. Why do you say that?
Well, I'd been thinking about doing a book for years, and then I got very, very ill, and during that period, I just decided now was the time to do the book because I wasn't sure I was going to be around to see the book published. So I would get up every day feeling very fatigued and from chemotherapy and everything, and I'd work on the book, and then after the first drafts were finished, then my my old heritage as a programmer kind of came back to the fore, and I would meticulously go through and edit and change and rephrase, and especially the technical details, you try to make them digestible for the lay public, but yet give them a sense, give everybody a sense of what it was like, and I hope I did that. But I went through every word in the book 8 times, and I don't need to read it again.
In terms of, was it hard though? A lot of people I think have made the mistake of saying that you've been a recluse. I think you've just been private. I think there's a difference between the two words. Has it been hard being so public about some of the stuff? Some of the stuff that you write in the book, and of course I'm talking about some of the anecdotes concerning Bill Gates, are just downright I'm waiting for the Hollywood version of how this is all going to play out. Is it tough to do that so publicly? How does that feel?
Well, when you write an autobiography like this, I mean, I think you're faced with a choice. Are you going to tell it as you experienced it and tell the highs and lows and the important parts of your life? And I just chose to do that in a very unvarnished, warts and all way, because I thought that was really what it deserved, and people deserved to hear. And I feel like I made I had some signature successes and some things that didn't work out as well. But that, hey, technology and other things, that happens. Not everything. You're not going to bat 1,000 in anything in technology.
But what do you make of the people? Some of them, like former Microsoft employees, like when the excerpt.
Which ones? Just kidding. I'm kidding.
I don't think they're in the audience, so I'm not
kidding.
going to name them. But some of whom were like surprised at the excerpt from Vanity Fair saying, why is he speaking out now? And why is he acting like, I mean, what's the point of that? Like, what's the point of airing out dirty laundry like that?
Well, that was a key moment in my life when I decided, you're a founder of a company and you decide to leave. And the way that it happened at that time was, stung. And so I felt it was important to tell that because it was a signature moment in my life. So, and give people an idea of that trajectory, which went from a hugely productive and innovative and fun partnership to the lows there at the end. And so I went on to do many other things since then. But that was definitely an important chapter in my life.
Well, I mean, it definitely is. It definitely reads like, for anybody who's read the book, it reads like a book in which somebody had nothing to lose. You just kind of wrote it all out. And I think in many ways that's a testament kind of to what you've done.
Yeah, and again, I wrote a lot of it, in those moments where I was thinking, I've got to get this down, I've got to tell it like it was, and hopefully people will get something out of it when they read it.
Now, did you give anybody, like, did you give Steve Ballmer, now the current, CEO of Microsoft, Bill Gates, did they get kind of a, hey, this is coming, just so you know? Did anybody get a heads up? Oh, they did get a heads up. And
Sure.
What did they say?
I have yet to talk to Bill about the book.
Yeah, I read that,
But I expect I'll have a very intense discussion with Bill. Steve I've talked to, and he basically says, hey, the book portrays, the Paul I know, and the events that you recount there, did happen. So
I mean, no one has challenged any facts in the book. So
no.
Can you take us back, at that moment when you were in 10th grade, he was in the 8th grade, this was Lakeside School, I think, North Seattle?
Yeah.
Like, what was it like to meet him why did you think you guys would click? What was the thing that you thought that, all right, this guy's interesting?
Well, there's some pictures of Bill and me together slaving over a hot ASR 33 teletype, which I think there's some examples downstairs here in the museum. I just remember Bill used to wear saddle shoes and sweaters. And he walks in, very gangly young man, and after a few weeks after this teletype terminal was at our high school, there were a few of us that were just almost elbowing our way to get time on the terminal, and Bill was one of them, and I was one of them, and there were a few others. And then at the end of the month, they would post up kind of a horrifying list of how much money you'd run up on the time-sharing service. And Bill and I were always up there at the top, and you think, how am I going to explain to my parents $68 on time-sharing, And so that was always anxiety-provoking.
Well, how about that day when you saw the article in Popular Mechanics? What was that, 1974?
Popular Electronics.
Popular Electronics. You saw it in Harvard Square. Actually, that magazine, if you check out the Revolutionaries exhibit in this museum, it's basically the first 2,000 years of computing. It's really interesting. But yeah, that magazine is like blown up downstairs. And what was that feeling like when you saw that magazine and you're basically telling about it?
It was a feeling of vindication because I'd been telling Bill for a long time, we should be doing a basic language interpreter for microprocessor chip. And first we'd actually built a machine based on the 8008 microprocessor chip for a failed company that processed the data produced by traffic recorders. And you used to drive over these rubber hoses in the street, and it would punch out a 16-channel BCD coded tape. This audience, I feel like I can get technical, right?
Everybody understand
Anybody have a
what you
problem with
just
that?
said?
Little
Okay.
technical jargon? It's okay? Okay, all right. So anyway, so to build that machine, I remember one day Bill and I think we schlepped down to Almac Strom and we bought this 8008 because I was convinced that we could basically build our own mini computer with a microprocessor chip, and we found a guy to do the engineering. And so it came wrapped in this, it was stuck into this piece of insulating plastic and wrapped in aluminum foil, and it cost $360, and we're like, wow, this is a whole processor, and it's, whatever. It's like an inch long or something, and so that's how we got our start. So we learned all about microprocessors then, and then I would say, Bill, we should do BASIC for the 8008, and he'd say, it's too slow, and it's only got a 7-level stack, and come on, Paul, it's going to be unusable. So then the 8080 came out, and I said, the 8080, Bill, come on, let's. And he'd say, but we don't know anybody back in Boston to build another, computer. Let's wait until somebody produces a computer with an 8080 in it. And then I went down to City News at Harvard Square and saw it and plunked down my 75 cents and ran back and showed the magazine to Bill. And
the first sentence of that article in that magazine was, the era of the computer in every home has arrived. That was the very first sentence. And I'm curious, kind of in concrete terms, when you spent, 2 months kind of, really Altair Basic and figuring this out, like what did that feel like? What were you envisioning this going? Where was it going, the way you were thinking about it?
Well,
that 2 month period?
Around that time, I mean, we didn't know, we had no idea what MITS was like, and I talked later in the book about flying out to Albuquerque and running that first version of BASIC. We had no idea exactly how fast the rocket of, home computers and personal computers was going to take off, and how our software was going to become an amazing part of that change. So we thought, well, geez, if we're really successful, maybe one day we'll have 35 employees. I think Microsoft is over 90,000 now.
Yeah.
So those were early days. You have to remember back then, there really were, there were...
What was the competition?
No, we were worried that there was competition, but, my role was kind of read every computer design, electronics news. I just read everything and trying to see, computer world was more about these behemoths that you see downstairs, 360s and Univacs and everything else. But my job was to look out over the horizon, see what could be coming, and I didn't see anything about basics from anybody else. So we thought we had a head start, but we weren't sure.
Well, I'm curious, and you probably know this, but Microsoft was founded the same year that Gordon Moore, the Intel co-founder, came up with Moore's law, right? Basically saying that the number of transistors incorporated in a chip will approximately double every 24 months. Did this matter to you then? Was this something you were thinking about then? This idea of everything getting to be cheaper, better, and faster?
Well, you could see the trend because
Yeah.
the first chip I was aware of was the 4004, then the 8008, of course, which we built that first machine on, and that's actually in a museum, in the Natural History Museum in Albuquerque, and then the 8080. So you were aware that the chips were getting so much better and so much faster and cheaper, and now, of course, every component of like a portable device or a computer, every part of it gets cheaper and faster and better every year. So it's been amazing. I mean, you knew that trend was happening. You didn't know it as necessarily as Moore's law at the time, but it was obviously happening in that way.
But actually, I thought the most interesting passage about Bill Gates in the book is when you wrote, quote, "I left Microsoft a quarter century before Bill did, and we both had our signal triumphs since then. But in certain respects, neither of us has been quite as good alone as we were together." So I'm reading this and I'm thinking to myself, wait up. So is he trying to say that what would have happened if you would have stayed at Microsoft? What would have happened, in the past 10 years that's been going on that Microsoft has fallen by the wayside? Not the wayside, but clearly isn't as sexy as Facebook or Twitter or Google. Like, do you ever think about what would have happened if you would have stayed?
Oh, I've thought about it. I mean, in technology, I mean, we just accomplished some amazing things, and Bill was an amazingly, to use Microsoft language, hardcore business person that did, and the company did super well, certainly in the years, right after I left. I think it's had more challenges recently. We'll probably talk about that in a few minutes, but yeah, you just think how, I mean, in retrospect, how lucky was I to have a partner as capable as Bill Gates, and then, we worked shoulder to shoulder writing that initial code, and I brought my ideas to the table. So yeah, of course I'd like to think that if I'd stayed there, I could have affected the course of things, but I had, when I left, I had really wasn't planning on staying. I wanted to start a new chapter in my life and do other things, and I actually tried to retire at age 30, which lasted for about 18 months.
And which actually brings me to this point, because you said that you thought about, that you basically had retired by 30, right? I mean, I'm looking, and of course that lasted 18 months, but I'm looking here in the Valley at people like, Jack Dorsey or Zuckerberg that are leading their own companies. Like, what advice would you give them, as somebody who's gone through that process of helping start something, and like, this is their life, this is what they're doing. I mean, would you tell them to just take a break, or what would you tell them?
Well, I mean, the other thing that influenced my departure, of course, was my health, and I didn't know, the doctors basically said they thought I was cured at age 30, but I didn't know that, so that was also a big wake-up call, a big factor and big wake-up call. But I mean, there's certain things that I don't think they're that mysterious, but you have to be eternally vigilant about new platforms coming down the pike, and if you think about Facebook and Twitter, both of those could have been created earlier. I mean, there used to be a thing called MySpace not that long ago. But you can, when a new platform comes along and evolves more rapidly, you can be obsoleted quickly. So you got to be incredibly vigilant. You have to hire the best people and retain them, which in Silicon Valley, the reason we didn't move Microsoft to Silicon Valley was because Bill said, but Paul, in Silicon Valley, everybody changes jobs in 18 months. Is it still true? That was in 1977.
It's still true.
Still true. So we said, yeah, Seattle, rain. Don't want to go outside. It's in front of your terminal. So anyway, and of course our families were there. So there's hiring and retaining great people. And then there's the blind spot thing where you just don't see these other platforms but that could potentially obsolete you coming, and companies like even Google and Apple, they didn't really see the social network stuff coming, taking root like it has.
Microsoft celebrated its 36th birthday earlier this month. 36th birthday. I'm curious, where do you think Microsoft is now in relation to, say, Google, Facebook, Apple? What you call, by the way, in the book as, what is it? High-tech hellhounds. Can you define that? Why did you call them high-tech hellhounds?
Those damn hellhounds, yeah. Yeah, that's from an old, actually, that phrase is from a blues song. But anyway, hellhounds, because Hellhounds on My Trail, I think is the name of the song. But yeah, I mean, Microsoft always had a lot of competition, but the competition today is incredibly fierce from the companies we've already talked about, and so they're trying to fight kind of a multi-front war, and it's hard to innovate. I mean, to get people to change their habits, their behavior, the inertia is pretty strong. So if you want to change someone to a different search engine, it has to be as good and better, or a social network, or a mobile phone platform. So they're working in a number of those areas, and I have friends over there, and I certainly encourage them and try to give them an idea now and then. But it's a big challenge, as it is for companies, Apple trying to do paying or something. It's a challenge to come from not having a position to being a major influencer in that area. So that's just the lay of the land right now.
Is that saying then that Microsoft is behind all those three companies? Is that?
No, just saying in some of these areas. I mean, enterprise. There are other areas like the PC and enterprise software. Microsoft has a great position, is superbly profitable and has some great people. But competing in all those different areas, that's another thing. You got to pick sometimes you have to pick your spots. And Microsoft also is in game platforms too, where they have a.
Hey, I like Halo. Position. Halo is great.
Connect, come on.
Oh, Connect, yes, that's true,
Connect.
yes.
Yeah.
But what I think is interesting is, let's not let it be said that, Microsoft is definitely still an influential, incredible company that's been like so woven into our lives. I mean, I grew up, Microsoft Word, PC, right? I think we kind of have forgotten that it's even there. It's so woven into our lives. But you've written in the book about what you called its breathtaking fall from grace. You wrote, I'm quoting you to yourself, "It wasn't so long ago that Microsoft stood by the slogan that Bill and I followed at the start. We set the standards. But there's no one in Redmond, speaking privately and candidly, who would make that claim today."
Well, I think I was referring to new standards for platforms. I mean, Microsoft has an amazing position. They have the leadership position on the PC, but we're all carrying around. There's different kinds of mobile devices, and now tablets have taken the field too. And people are trying to. There's going to be an incredible battle between different tablet suppliers too. So when these new platforms come down the pike, it's incumbent on you to really internalize that and mount your attack to keep your amazing engine going in these new areas. And Microsoft has been lagging in some of these areas, and I'm very straightforward about that in the book.
I mean, and you basically said that if Microsoft fails to catch up in mobile, it's in for a long, slow slide. What do you think strategy-wise can Microsoft do with Windows Mobile to kind of get it up in the same? For example, the market share is nowhere near where BlackBerry, in terms of the software for the BlackBerry or the iPhone or even the Android. Like, what do you think Microsoft can do?
Well, and any time you're challenged by when you're coming from behind on a platform, you have to meet the capabilities and then have some things that are persuasive to get people to switch, because people won't switch unless something is dramatically better. I mean, look at the example of Google. There was a time when there was, there must have been there was Yahoo and 5 other search engines, and then they came up with something better.
Yeah.
So to really take back huge chunks of market share, you've got to meet and beat, and that requires shorter development cycles, maybe your best people, agility, and focus. A lot of focus.
Well, I mean, I'm curious from an investment perspective. I was actually, of course, doing some reading on you, and a business reporter once wrote that you suffered from a sort of investor's attention deficit disorder. That there was one point that you invested in more than 100 internet media and communications companies, and the miscalculations have been costly. So I'm just curious, what has been in your mind from an investment standpoint? And don't worry, I'm going to ask about the biggest success. So I'm not just going to ask you to talk about the failure.
That's a relief.
But I'm curious, from your perspective, what has been, you think, the biggest failure for you, the most costly?
The most costly by far was Charter Communications. I felt that cable was potentially a new platform because they were going to have high-speed pipes into millions and millions of homes, which back then they didn't, and now they do. But the product cycle in cable is very slow compared to anything else, just about. So to put new set-top boxes and take advantage of those capabilities took longer than I expected, but the actual delivery of data into people's homes has been fantastically successful for cable. But the main problem with Charter was just the amount of leverage, which was too high.
Well, how about in terms
but in terms of the breadth of things.
Yeah, I mean you've Ticketmaster? I mean, of course, that wasn't a success. You made money off that.
Yeah, Ticketmaster invested in
AOL.
AOL early, sold too early, Priceline, many other things, and started ESPN, what's now ESPN.com, sold that to Disney. So many successes along the way, but you invest, if you invest during the internet bubble or something, a bubble's a bubble, so everyone's going to get, going to have some painful experiences during a bubble too. So I've tried to do many different things and had some great successes and some signature failures. So, and they're all in the, I think they're pretty much the big ones, the big bad ones and the big good ones are mostly in the book.
Yeah, and by the way, what would you consider the biggest successes investment-wise? DreamWorks, would you consider that part of
No,
that?
no, Hollywood is so, I mean, the Hollywood mentality. Microsoft, I mean, just to give you an example, in Microsoft, if we made a mistake or missed the trend or whatever, when I was there, we would just flagellate ourselves. How did we miss that? How are we going to catch up? And Hollywood, you say, but this movie, it's not that great, and box office was horrible. And they said, well, we've got another movie coming out. And so it's not, you don't have the post-analysis that you do in, that I think a healthy post-analysis like you have in technology, good technology companies. So I was a bit of a fish out of water in that world. I tried to contribute a few things. One of the few things I think I talk about in the book that was, this is the level of effect I had. I said, hey, Shrek, when he walks, the ground doesn't deform, there's no dust, and your brain's telling you something is wrong, but you don't know what it is. And so it said, okay, we're going to fix it, cost $1 million, it's fine now. So that's the kind of effect.
I'm sorry, what was that, $1 million you said?
I think it was $1 million. So I think that's a lot for dust, but so I mean, I've done some documentary films that we talked about earlier.
Yeah.
One on psychology called This Emotional Life, one on global health, and one on evolution, which I'm very, very proud of our documentary work. But documentaries, are just philanthropic endeavors, basically.
Yeah. But I mean, from your perspective, what has been for you the best investment so far?
Well, I mean, a few years ago I invested in some people convinced me to invest in oil and gas pipelines.
Yes, I read about it. Okay, go on.
Turns out a lot of people need oil and gas, and so I did very well on that investment, but it's not one of those things, most the investments that I really enjoy, that was super profitable, but the investments I really enjoy are the ones where, you think as a technology person, you can add some value, and that happens, and it's really rewarding. You're early, you see, hey, online services, AOL, it's going to do great. And then I thought, it's doing great, but Microsoft says they're going to crush AOL, so maybe time to sell. So I sold and made some money. So I've had, again, just pure investing, probably the oil and gas, pure investing and not technology, the oil and gas thing.
Which tech companies right now, by the way, here in the Valley, would you invest on, if you could?
But the valuations are so crazily high.
No, they're not.
You sure?
Yeah, they are. Yeah, they are. Like, what would you invest on?
Again, I mean, I don't want to comment on any known companies. I think you do your best due diligence to make sure there's something really, really new and defensible. I mean, I've had a few ideas in the last couple of years, and I'd say, what if you did combine this with this? Because a lot of my best ideas are a combination of basic and then microprocessor chip or whatever. And I'd say, what about that? And then my staff would say, Paul, there's 20 companies doing that. And I'd say, geez, okay, well, so it's very, very crowded right now. So you have to be super aware of the competitive landscape and whether somebody else has momentum.
I mean, I should point out, by the way, that when I was writing this up, this idea of owning a football team, right? The Seattle Seahawks, right? Mm-hmm. Basketball team, the Portland Trail Blazers. What is the score, by the way? When we were in the green room, he was basically looking at the scores. I think they were down $5 or something like that. You funded the first privately financed rocket to fly the edge of space. You founded your own music museum. You owned the guitar that Jimi Hendrix played at Woodstock. And apparently you also owned the chair that Captain Kirk sat at in the Star Wars movie. Is that true? Okay.
It's a modified office chair, though, so.
Oh, okay. All right.
It's not as impressive in person as it looks on the bridge of the Enterprise.
And then there's this, 8-level, 414 feet yacht. And In addition to
I'm
that,
starting to feel bad.
no, I'm just saying. I'm curious. I mean, as I'm writing all this stuff down, I'm thinking to myself, is there like anything that you've wanted to do that you haven't actually done?
Well, I think, we haven't talked about the brain yet, but there.
Yes, we will,
I mean,
yeah.
I think when you start talking about scientific problems or challenges, I mean, the fact that SpaceShipOne succeeded, nobody knew that.
And it won a prize,
and won
right?
the X Prize. Nobody knew
Yeah.
that was going to happen when we started. So sometimes, by being ambitious and trying to accomplish some of these things, sometimes you fail. Sometimes you never succeed to win a prize or get the product's not a success in the marketplace. But it's the ambition to try. That's you have a great team of people. That's just enthralling. So there are many challenges out there. I'm especially excited about anything related to the brain and what the Brain Institute's doing, and then artificial intelligence. I still have always had a nagging interest in, and we're starting to get some traction there. So, but I think you're talking about more things that are more related to
Your personal life, in terms of everything that you've
well,
wanted
if you're
to
talking
do.
about sheer fun,
Yeah.
I mean, I was just in Antarctica a couple months ago, and that's fascinating. You slowly cruise up on a sleeping whale or something. It's wonderful. But then you go visit the scientists, and they say, "Here's the bay that you're in, and here's what it looked like 20 years ago, and it was full of ice. And there's no ice; it's almost gone." I mean, so the global warming stuff. That's
real. That's real.
Yeah, so you can see it. You can see it. So in terms of adventures, and there's a chapter in the book about adventures. I've and some of the thinking there was inspired by, seeing Jacques Cousteau movies as a kid. I don't know. I've had just wonderful experiences trying to explore the fun side, and I think the fun side of life. And I think it's incumbent on all of us that are in technology to think, how do we balance our lives between the siren of like, I can fix that last bug, versus, no, maybe I should go home and spend some more time with my family, or whatever it might be, or go bowling, whatever the other things that calls to you are. Music for me is a big passion.
Yeah, I mean, clearly. And actually, back to the brain, because I'm curious, because there was some report that just came out about the landmark map of the human brain, right? Why was it so groundbreaking? This is, of course, from the Allen Institute for Brain Science. Why was that so groundbreaking?
Well, we're doing things at industrial scale. So we basically get human brains in, slice them up, and then look at the gene expression for all 25,000 plus genes in the human brain, and put the data online for scientists around the world to use in their research. And so it's no individual lab could do it to the level, I think, of thoroughness and quality and multiple brains. It takes an industrial type approach, like was used in the Human Genome Project.
Yeah.
So we started with the mouse brain, now we're doing human, developing human. We did some work on autistic brains. So it's endlessly fascinating to me, because the way the brain works is we're just starting to see the outlines of it. We're starting to get a sketchy idea of it. And there's so much work to be done. And each part, since each part was designed by evolution, it's optimized for what it does in particular. So it's the opposite of computer, which is basically pretty much a regular structure. The brain, every little bit of it is optimized to do its job. So it's endlessly fascinating, compelling, and mind-boggling.
Well, we have a question here from Ed Feigenbaum, who apparently is the guru of artificial intelligence, who's actually here tonight. And the question is, Paul, in my view, Vulcan, which is the company that you own, is supporting and managing one of the best artificial intelligence projects in the world. Can you tell the audience a little bit about it and what motivated you to set it up?
Well, on the one hand, you're trying to finish off on the brain, you're trying to understand, how does the brain, ultimately we all love to know, how does the brain work? How does the brain work? And then, if there are treatments for neurodegenerative diseases like Alzheimer's, which my mother has, how can you make those treatments happen earlier? So I'm fascinated by all that work on the brain, which works totally differently. Then you've got artificial intelligence, where programmers sit there with blank sheets of paper and say, okay, you don't know how the brain works, but we want to do something similar. So I have a team in Seattle trying to encode, initially it's a biology textbook, and put all that knowledge in software. It's a well-trodden path, but it's super hard to do knowledge representation, as I'm sure Mr. Feigenbaum could elaborate at better length than I can. It's super hard to do that in software because real-life reasoning involves probabilities and things that are still research areas for artificial intelligence. So we're moving down that path, and you can see 10, 20, 30 years down the road, maybe we'll have something really, really significant there and some more breakthroughs. But in the meantime, we're concentrating on getting a biology text inside computer software in a way that a student can ask questions and they'll get a coherent answer from the software. So it's really some groundbreaking work, and Mark Greaves and a team in Seattle are managing it. We actually have work done at SRI and many other places to forward that work.
Would you say that right now Project Halo, which is the
Right.
AI, and also the Institute, are those the two projects that you're most excited about right now?
Yeah, I mean, I have a couple of little internet things that are incubating, but I mean, the brain and AI, those two things alone, you could spend many lifetimes trying to figure out ways to accelerate progress. So I'm just excited to be involved in those areas, and I'm looking out for other areas and other things that any philanthropy. I should stop for a second. I mean, philanthropy is a wonderful thing to be involved in, to be able to give back, because if you have signature success, I think it's incumbent on you to give back, and
And you pledged last July, right? You pledged.
Yeah, I'd always intended to give
Yeah.
the majority of my assets to philanthropy, and Bill called me up and said, would you join? And he's done so many, I mean, he's taken on some very, very tough problems in global health and
Education.
malaria and education. Those are huge problems. But I think if you're doing your own philanthropy, you have to say, okay, what appeals to me? What makes where can I make a difference in terms of the solution of this problem? So I'm really focused on the brain right now.
All right, I'm going to ask some questions from the audience.
And local philanthropy.
Yeah, the Pacific Northwest has benefited. I think was it nearly $1 billion? I think in investment and in philanthropy in that area. So, who was your mentor? Is it important to have one? That's one question.
Well, I mean, I think through your life you have a series of people that have a positive influence and give you a chance to succeed. Obviously, my parents, that I talk about a lot in the book. Basically, my father was a librarian, my mother was a school teacher, so I spent so much time, around books and in the stacks at the University of Washington Library, and just tried to absorb everything I could. And then when I got to high school, obviously, we kind of were self-taught, except there were a bunch of ex-MIT and Stanford people at the computer center that was giving away free time that we got hooked up with. And I don't know, is Steve Russell here tonight? Did you make it? Anyway, Steve Russell, who did space war for the PDP-1, Bill and I would literally dive in dumpsters to get these listings of coffee-stained listings.
Codes.
And I could smell that coffee today. And then we pour through these listings of code and we go, oh my gosh, I don't know what it's doing, but it's beautiful. So you kind of absorb some of that through osmosis, as you go along the way. But so active mentoring, and then the teachers you have in school too that get you excited about other things like Shakespeare or whatever. I mean, it's so important. I mean, I've enjoyed having a well-rounded life where I'm interested in so many different things. I mean, I try to convey it a little bit in the book, but
I think you did.
If there's so many things that are unbelievably fascinating in the world, whether it's literature or art or the oceans, I don't know, you could keep going on music, you could go on and on forever. So any of those worlds you can get drawn into if you've got somebody that that shows you the way, is excited about it. Or the Experience Music Project Museum in Seattle, we deliberately tried, like I think this museum is doing, to show young people that, hey, you can play, try playing a guitar, and if you can make a couple notes, maybe you want to learn how to play guitar. And you can do the same thing, I think, with, hopefully, do more things here to get young people interested in programming.
Another question, what do you see as the next big thing, and why?
Ooh, that's a hard one. I mean, I think eventually some of these AI type systems, and recently we saw Watson win at Jeopardy,
Yeah.
some of those things, eventually those things are going to be, so much better, or speech understanding will be so much better. But in terms of, things happening in the cloud or whatever, I can't say anything particular there.
Okay, this is a really great question. Paul, at an early age, you achieved fabulous wealth, which enabled you to recreate your life in any way you wanted to. Was that liberating or horrifying? To have everything you ever wanted to do right in front of you, is that liberating or horrifying?
Well, no, it gives you so many more possibilities and options, and but then you're a steward of those assets. So if you have reversals or whatever, a big reversal, you just feel awful. So you have to be very, very careful, and I mean, all of the the resources that I have, by far the lion's share of those are going to go to philanthropy when I pass. So there is that realization that you have to keep that in mind.
Please describe interactions with IBM late 70s as the PC emerged. So basically, Microsoft, you guys said, we're not going to wear ties like IBM people wear ties, right? Wasn't that what we were just talking about?
Well, there's a famous story how Bill goes to the first meeting in Boca, and he forgot to bring a tie, so they had to buy a tie at the last second for him. But by the time we were working on the IBM PC in Seattle, it was just really, I was just on pins and needles because the basic that we were doing was going to go on read-only memory, and I was just so afraid that there were going to be bugs in it, which there were, just a couple. There were a couple of bugs in there, so I put these little hooks in so I could replace in RAM any bad areas of the ROM code, and those turned out to be invaluable. But the basic thing about IBM is they didn't like when we were doing DOS. There's a story in the book where Bill and I are arguing about the fact that DOS 2.0 was delayed, and I thought this thing called tree structured directories and path names should be in DOS 2.0, and IBM wanted partitions, and so to get tree structured directories, which I can't claim any credit for, they were part of Unix back in the day. The IBM guys were like, well, we're happy with partitions. And I'm going like, no, tree structured, you got to get tree structured directories. And then of course the product got delayed, and there was a bunch of back and forth about that. But I mean, they were basically, they basically came to us and said, we want to do a PC, we want to buy all your software, where do we get an operating system? Your languages seem great, and anyway, the rest is history. But so we were really, as kids in our late 20s, young men in our late 20s, we knew it was going to be big, but we had no idea how big that opportunity was going to be turned out to be, because everybody wanted to make a copy of the IBM PC.
Okay, we have a space question. What do you expect from SpaceShipOne? A true commercial space flight company? Maybe an early Boeing or Lockheed?
Well, Richard Branson has already taken the patents and took a license for the SpaceShipOne technology, and I think in not too long, I don't know if it's a year or 2 years, they'll start flying paying passengers into space, and it basically you go straight up and you come straight back down in a period of about half an hour, and it's an amazing ride, and you're floating weightless in space for about 5 minutes. So that's going to be exciting. But when I was watching these flights, I was used to, well, if something goes wrong, I'll get an error message. In rocketry, if something goes wrong,
oh shoot,
it's with a human being inside, it's really bad. Like another naive question, I have a history of occasionally asking questions that in retrospect appear humorous. I said, so why, but not this one really, because I said, well, there had to be 3 seats in SpaceShipOne so to win the X Prize. She had to be capable of flying 3 people into space. And I said, well, why are all our test flights only 1 person? And they said, in case something goes wrong, Paul. And I went, oh yeah, yeah. So when those flights were happening, I was so nervous and just so happy when they got back on the ground.
Please speak a little bit about Judgment Day, intelligent design.
That was a documentary that we did, following up on the evolution documentary, where we talk about a court case that happened about textbooks and everything. It's interesting. I recommend people see it. But basically, there's this theory in intelligent design that people that just try to justify intelligent design say there aren't these intermediate forms. If you get a flagella on a bacteria or something like that, there's no way it could have been created other than by an intelligent designer. And yet biologists, you put biologists in the witness stand, they say, wait a minute, no, there's like 5 intermediate forms, and then the argument kind of devolves down into, well, what about between those forms? And then you go, wait a minute, well, we found this one. Well, there's still, so but basically there are the intermediate forms for all these things exist in some way. So, in my opinion, so that's what it's about.
I got actually 4 questions here, all about what it was like to face your mortality. And I actually think I wanted to bring up the fact in the book you actually thank 2 doctors, right? Because you were diagnosed and recovered from cancer twice. Was it nearly 30 years was the time difference?
Same doctor.
Same doctor. I'm curious, what was the difference?
He's good.
I mean, you said when you were first diagnosed the first time, you said that it was a wake-up call.
Turns out the alarm can go off more than once.
In late 2009, when you got diagnosed for the second time, what went through your head?
Well, I mean, the first time when you have what I had, Hodgkin's disease, they actually developed the treatment that I had here at Stanford. In fact, I was just in the Stanford book. I love bookstores. So I was in the Stanford bookstore today, and there was a book about this doctor, I think it was Dr. Henry Kaplan, that developed the treatment for radiation treatment for Hodgkin's disease. And so they tell you when you get this radiation, look, we're giving you the amount of radiation basically that the body can stand, and that at some period of time, maybe 20 or 30 years, there may be repercussions of having that radiation. But when you're 30 and you have a life-threatening illness, it's just a shock. You can't believe it, and then it takes a while to realize you're going to be, you have the chance to be okay. At least I had that chance. This last situation, I just knew I was really, really sick, and it had advanced. It was an advanced case, so.
Stage 4, right?
Yeah, stage 4. So, but they had the kind of the standard. I mean, it was like one of those things where they call you up and they say, just kind of weird echo. When I was first sick, they called me up and they said, okay, we found some bad cells, and that's just that moment where your blood runs cold, and then you meet with the oncologist and he says, well, actually it's this. They called it garden variety large B cell lymphoma, whatever, and he said it's actually the good news. The bad news is it's progressed. The good news is it's curable. So I consider myself very lucky.
I'm going to ask one more question from the audience. I'm going to ask then my last question. How does your attitude towards living life reflect your 2 battles with mortality?
Well, again, I'll get back to the balance point.
Yeah.
I think you have to think about all the things you do, to enjoy, work and creating things. But there's so many other parts of life that you need to do justice to and explore. And so to find that balance is such an important thing. And when these things happen, you realize the importance of key friends and family. And then you ask yourself, and if I only have limited time, what do I focus on? So you do go through that soul-searching process.
Lastly, I kind of wanted to go back to like Lakeside School. When you were in 10th grade, he was in 8th grade, and you were dumpster diving, looking for codes, right? If that were to happen like now in 2011, in this age of apps and mobile devices and Facebook and Twitter and Google and Bing and everything else, what do you think would an 8th grader and a 10th grader be looking for in that dumpster? And what would they build?
Well, I'm not sure how many listings people make anymore, much less coffee stained. Well, coffee stained, at least in Seattle, I'm sure there's still coffee stained. But, I think today the rate at which young people adopt new technology is breathtaking.
Yeah.
And we were talking earlier about how do you get them excited about becoming programmers or developing things. There's so many kids today that are excited to spend hours online, playing this role-playing thing or this first-person shooter, whatever. I was interested in how anything worked internally.
In the mind,
yeah. How does it do graphics that look that great? And those are the engineers of the future, so we really have to put on our thinking caps and try to figure out how to get kids today excited about being the creators of tomorrow.
I think I'm going to invite John up here. I should say, by the way, I grew up here. I went to Mountain View High School. I grew up like a few blocks from here.
Right.
And what's interesting is going through the museum downstairs and kind of, again, the first 2,000 years of computer. For me, like, you were there during the birth of the personal computer revolution. I am somebody who has directly benefited from that revolution. Who has been able to basically create like a life for myself because the internet and computing was the way to go. So I just wanted to personally thank you for that.
Well, thank you.
The PC era, one of the great game changers of modern life. Explore the history of computing and you'll connect the past to the future. See you next time for the Computer History Museum presents Revolutionaries.